Under the desert sky, a young Apache woman changed my life forever. The traveler had always felt the quiet tug of something beyond the ordinary. Life in the city had become predictable, each day folding neatly into the next, but in that predictability, a restlessness grew. There was a longing for something different, something that would stir the soul and shake loose the chains of routine. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that he had to leave, even if he didn't have a clear destination in mind. One morning, with a small backpack, a notebook, and a camera slung over his shoulder, he drove away from the city streets and into the wide, open landscapes of the Southwest. The road stretched endlessly, bordered by rocky cliffs, golden plains, and distant mountains that rose like silent guardians. There was a stillness here that the city never had, a quiet that seemed to hum beneath the wind and the sky. The sun blazed during the day, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, and at night, the sky opened up in a blanket of stars so vast that it seemed almost impossible to comprehend. He stopped at small towns along the way, always moving, always observing. He watched the people go about their daily lives, taking mental notes of their laughter, their kindness, and the ways they carried themselves with pride and patience. Sometimes, he joined the locals for a cup of coffee, listening to their stories, but mostly he traveled alone. It was in solitude that he felt most alive, most aware of the small details. The way sunlight glinted off sandstone cliffs, the soft whisper of the wind through dry grasses, the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. On the 5th day of his journey, he decided to camp near a remote stretch of desert, far from the roads and towns. He wanted to experience the desert in its purest form, away from the hum of engines, the chatter of tourists, and the distractions of modern life. As he set up his small tent, he felt a thrill of anticipation. Nights in the desert were different from anywhere else. They were quieter, slower, and in that silence he hoped to discover something, though he didn't yet know what that something would be. The sun dipped low behind the distant mesas, spilling deep shadows across the sand. He built a small fire, the flames crackling and sending sparks into the cooling air. He ate a simple meal of bread and dried fruit, savoring the taste more than he ever had in the city. Then, as darkness settled over the land, he lay on his back, staring up at the stars. They were countless, stretching from horizon to horizon, brighter and clearer than any night he had ever seen. In that moment, the desert felt alive, as if it were breathing alongside him, welcoming him into its vastness. It was then that he noticed a figure in the distance, moving steadily across the sand dunes. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the flickering fire, but the figure persisted. Curious and cautious, he watched as a young woman walked with grace and confidence, seemingly at home in the desert's expanse. Her presence felt out of place yet perfectly natural, as though she belonged to the desert in a way he could not yet understand. He didn't approach her immediately. Something in her calm demeanor suggested patience, respect, and a quiet strength. Instead, he observed from a distance, taking in her movements. She paused occasionally to examine the ground, to touch a plant or watch the horizon. He wondered who she was and why she was here, alone in the vast desert. His curiosity was strong, but it was accompanied by a strange sense of reverence. This was someone who moved with the rhythm of the land, someone who seemed connected to the earth itself. Finally, as the fire's glow waned, she noticed him. Their eyes met briefly, and he felt an inexplicable recognition, as if the universe had deliberately brought them together. She smiled, a simple, warm smile that didn't demand anything but acknowledged his presence. He returned the smile, unsure if he should speak or remain silent. There was a weight to this moment, a significance he could not yet explain. After a pause, she spoke in a soft, clear voice. "You're far from the towns," she said. "Not many come out here." He nodded. "I wanted to see the desert, really see it," he replied. "It feels different here, somehow alive." She looked at him thoughtfully, then gestured to the sand around them. "The desert teaches if you listen," she said. "It's quiet, but it speaks to those who are willing to hear." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that this encounter was unlike any he had experienced before. It wasn't just a meeting between two strangers. It felt like the beginning of a story, one that would change him in ways he couldn't yet predict. They talked for hours, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. She told him about the desert, its history, and the traditions of her people. He listened, fascinated, each story revealing a connection between the land and the lives that had flourished here for generations. He learned about the importance of water, the respect for every living creature, and the ways in which her ancestors had survived and thrived in this harsh environment. Her words were not just lessons. They were invitations to see the world differently, to appreciate the subtle details, and to understand life as something more than just moving from one day to the next. As the night deepened, a gentle wind swept across the dunes, carrying with it the scent of sage and dry earth. The traveler realized that he had not felt this kind of peace or clarity in years. The city had dulled his senses, numbed his curiosity, and masked his ability to truly see the world. Here, under the desert sky, he felt awake again. He felt present. When dawn approached, painting the horizon with shades of pink and gold, he looked at her and knew that this moment would stay with him forever. He didn't understand why or how, but he sensed that this encounter was not accidental. There was a quiet wisdom in her eyes, a strength in her presence, and a kindness in her smile that spoke to something deep within him. Before she left to continue her path, she turned to him once more. "The desert has many lessons," she said. "You must be patient to understand them all, but it will guide you if you let it." He watched her disappear into the early morning light, feeling a mixture of awe and anticipation. He had come to the desert seeking adventure, but he had found something much greater, a glimpse of a world he had never known, and a person whose presence would change the way he viewed life forever. As he packed his tent and prepared to continue his journey, he realized that the desert was no longer just a landscape. It was a teacher, a guide, and a witness to the beginning of a transformation. And at the center of this transformation was the young woman who had appeared under the desert sky, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary encounters come when we least expect them, in places we might never have thought to look. The traveler felt a quiet excitement for the days ahead. He knew that his journey had only just begun, that the lessons of the desert and the wisdom of the young Apache woman would continue to unfold. And as he stepped onto the sand once more, he carried with him a newfound sense of wonder, a deeper curiosity about the world, and an awareness that life, like the desert, was vast, unpredictable, and full of unexpected beauty. The traveler had been walking with the young Apache woman for several days now. Every step across the desert felt different from what he had imagined. The sand was no longer just a stretch of heat and dryness. It was a living, breathing part of the land, full of secrets and lessons waiting to be discovered. The traveler had thought he came to the desert to escape, to find solitude, but he was learning that the desert was not about running away. It was about noticing, understanding, and listening, and the woman beside him was teaching him how to do all three. Each morning, the sun rose slowly over the distant mesas, casting a golden light across the dunes. The traveler would wake before dawn, watching the first rays touch the desert like a painter's brush. She was already awake, quietly moving about, collecting small plants, examining the soil, and listening to the soft whispers of the wind. At first, he thought she had some secret knowledge, some kind of magic that allowed her to communicate with the land. But soon, he realized it was something simpler and more profound: attention. She noticed what most people ignored, respected what most people overlooked, and understood the rhythm of life in a way that seemed natural to her. She taught him how to find water hidden beneath the sand, how to read the tracks of small animals, and how to distinguish edible plants from those that were dangerous. Every lesson came with a story, a history, or a cultural memory that made the desert feel alive. He learned that survival was not about fear, but about respect. Respect for the land, for the creatures, and for the knowledge passed down through generations. He began to feel a sense of humility, realizing how little he truly understood about the world he thought he knew. At first, the traveler struggled. He stumbled over roots, misread tracks, and nearly made mistakes that could have been costly, but she never scolded him. Instead, she encouraged him quietly, pointing out what he had missed, showing him again and again how to observe with patience and care. Her teaching was gentle but firm, and he began to see that learning was not about rushing or forcing understanding. It was about slowing down, paying attention, and allowing the desert to reveal itself on its own terms. As they moved together, the woman shared stories about her ancestors. She spoke of how they had lived in harmony with the desert for centuries, following the seasons, respecting the animals, and understanding the plants. She told him about ceremonies that honored the sun, the rain, and the wind, and about the wisdom embedded in each ritual. The traveler listened intently, fascinated by the depth of knowledge and connection that existed in a world so different from his own. It was a world that felt alive, full of meaning, and connected in ways he had never experienced in the structured life of the city. One afternoon, they came across a small canyon where the wind whistled softly through the rocks. She led him to a hidden pool of water, shaded by stones and partially covered by plants. "Many people walk past this place without noticing," she said. "They do not understand that the desert gives, but only to those who observe carefully." He knelt beside the water, marveling at its clarity, and realized that he had taken so much for granted in life: the food, the water, the air he breathed. Here, every gift felt intentional, every small blessing was noticeable, and gratitude became a natural part of his thoughts. As days passed, their connection deepened. It was no longer just about learning survival skills or understanding the desert. It was about seeing the world through another person's eyes. She showed him how to find beauty in simplicity, how to appreciate silence, and how to let go of the constant rush that had filled his city life. He began to feel a sense of peace he had never known. The desert was no longer intimidating or empty. It was a teacher, a friend, and a mirror reflecting his own capacity for patience, resilience, and understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges, pinks, and purples, they sat together on a high dune. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of dry grass and warm sand. The traveler realized he had learned more in these few days than in months of city life. He turned to her, feeling gratitude that went beyond words. "I don't think I could have learned any of this without you," he said softly. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. "The desert teaches everyone differently," she said. "Some listen, some ignore. You chose to listen, and that makes all the difference." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He understood that these lessons were not just about the desert, they were about life itself. Patience, observation, humility, respect, and gratitude were lessons he could carry far beyond the sand and sun. The following days were filled with small discoveries. He learned to track animals by observing subtle clues, tiny footprints, broken branches, or the rustle of movement in the distance. He learned to predict weather changes by noticing patterns in the wind and the clouds. He learned the names and uses of plants, understanding which could heal and which could harm. Each day brought a new skill, a new insight, and a new appreciation for the land. But the most important lesson was not a skill, it was the way she lived her life. Her calm, steady presence, her ability to notice the small and respect the large, and her unwavering connection to the land inspired him more than any practical knowledge could. One morning, while the desert was bathed in soft golden light, they came across an area where ancient rock paintings marked the stones. She explained that these markings were messages from ancestors, stories of hunts, ceremonies, and life events. The traveler traced his fingers over the carvings, feeling the age and history embedded in the rock. "Our past is always with us," she said. "It guides us, teaches us, and reminds us of where we came from. We must honor it to live fully in the present." He realized that the desert itself was a repository of memory, each stone and plant a witness to centuries of life and experience. That evening, as they made camp under a sky filled with stars, the traveler felt a profound sense of connection, not only to the desert but to humanity, to history, and to the natural world. The lessons were no longer abstract. They were living, breathing experiences he could feel in his bones. And through it all, she was there, not as a teacher dictating knowledge, but as a guide showing him the way, letting him discover truths on his own, always encouraging, always patient. He began to understand that life did not need to be hurried. The desert taught him that meaning was found in observation, patience, and awareness. He began to carry these lessons into everything he did, his steps, his thoughts, even the way he breathed. He noticed the smallest details now, the sound of sand shifting beneath his feet, the shadow of a lizard moving across a rock, the gentle curve of a cloud in the sky. Every moment felt alive and precious, and he knew that he would carry this awareness with him forever. By the end of the week, the traveler was no longer the same person who had first arrived in the desert. He had discovered skills, knowledge, and insights, but more importantly, he had discovered a way to see the world differently. The lessons of the desert were simple, yet profound, and the presence of the young Apache woman had made all the difference. She had taught him to observe, to respect, to be patient, and to find beauty in every detail. She had shown him that life was not just about moving forward. It was about being present, being aware, and embracing the world with openness and humility. As they camped one final night before parting ways to continue their separate journeys, the traveler felt a mixture of gratitude and awe. The desert had given him knowledge, but she had given him understanding. He realized that this experience was a turning point, a chapter in his life that would remain with him forever. The desert had changed his mind, but she had touched his heart. Under the wide expanse of the desert sky, filled with countless stars that seemed to shine just for him, he made a quiet promise to carry these lessons into his life, to honor the wisdom he had been shown, and to never forget the woman who had guided him through the silence, the wind, and the beauty of the desert. The desert, which had once felt vast and welcoming, suddenly revealed a harsher side. The winds grew stronger, whipping sand into every corner, scratching at skin, and making even simple steps a challenge. The traveler and the young Apache woman had learned to read the land, but nature had its own plans. That day, dark clouds rolled across the horizon, and the air felt heavy with the promise of a storm. The desert's beauty was no longer just in the golden light of dawn or the peaceful stretch of sand. It now demanded attention, respect, and courage. They had been following a narrow canyon path when the first gusts hit. Sand swirled around them, and the sound of the wind grew into a constant roar. The traveler stumbled, shielding his face, while the woman moved with steady, deliberate steps. It was as though she had been expecting this, and her calmness gave him strength. She gestured for him to stay close and led him to a small overhang of rock that offered some protection from the wind and sand. They crouched together, catching their breath, while the desert storm raged around them. The traveler had faced challenges before, but none like this. He realized how fragile human plans were when nature decided to test them. Yet as he looked at her, he felt a strange sense of comfort. She was not just a guide through the land. She was a guide through fear, through uncertainty, and through the unexpected moments that life sometimes threw at a person. The storm lasted for hours. They shared water sparingly, eating small bites of food, while the wind howled like a living creature outside their rocky shelter. The traveler observed her closely, noticing the way she remained composed, checking the rocks and sand, listening to the wind and making small adjustments to keep them safe. Her presence was steady, reassuring, and full of quiet wisdom. He realized that courage was not loud or dramatic. It was calm, patient, and thoughtful. During the storm, they spoke less, but each conversation was meaningful. She reminded him to pay attention to subtle changes, the smell of the air, the movement of sand, the direction of clouds. "The desert speaks," she said softly. "Not all words are loud. Some lessons come quietly, and if you ignore them, you might not survive." The traveler listened, feeling that these words were not just about the desert, they were about life itself. Challenges came quietly and unexpectedly, and the way to overcome them was not with panic, but with awareness, patience, and trust. As night fell, the storm showed no sign of relenting. The wind continued to howl, and sand blew in unpredictable directions, making even their protected spot uncomfortable. Yet, the traveler felt a bond with the woman stronger than ever. She guided him in making small adjustments, taught him how to cover his face and eyes, and even shared a story about her grandmother surviving a similar storm decades ago. The story was not dramatic or exaggerated, but it carried a weight of experience, of resilience, and of faith in oneself and the land. Hours passed slowly. The traveler began to notice things he hadn't before: how the rocks offered different shelter depending on angle, how the wind carried certain scents that could signal a shift in weather, and how remaining calm and observant could make a huge difference. He had come to the desert seeking adventure, but he was learning that adventure was not always excitement. It was often patience, endurance, and quiet reflection. By the early morning, the storm began to ease. The sky lightened slightly, and the wind softened to a gentle push. They emerged from their shelter, covered in dust and sand but unhurt. The desert looked different now, washed by the rain, with small puddles reflecting the first light of the sun. It was breathtaking. The traveler realized that the storm, though difficult, had transformed the landscape into something more alive, more vibrant, and more beautiful than he could have imagined. They continued their journey, moving slowly to avoid treacherous patches of mud and slippery rocks. The traveler noticed how the woman navigated the terrain effortlessly, stepping carefully, checking each stone and footprint. He tried to mirror her movements, aware that every choice mattered now. For the first time, he truly understood the connection between knowledge, patience, and survival. It was no longer just about learning lessons. It was about applying them when it mattered most. As they walked, they encountered tracks of desert animals displaced by the storm, small rabbits, lizards, and birds. The woman pointed them out, explaining how animals adapted to sudden changes in their environment. "Everything has a way of surviving," she said. "Even when it seems impossible, there is always a path forward." The traveler felt inspired. He realized that the storm was not just a challenge but also a teacher, showing him resilience, adaptability, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. By midday, they found a sheltered area near a small cluster of trees. They rested, ate what little food they had, and drank water slowly. The traveler had never felt so exhausted, yet so alive. Every muscle ached, every step had required focus, but he also felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The storm had tested him in ways the desert had not before, and he felt stronger, braver, and more connected to the land. During the rest period, they talked more deeply about life. She shared insights about her family, her community, and the importance of carrying knowledge forward. The traveler spoke about his own life, his city experiences, and how easy it was to feel lost in the noise and rush of modern living. She listened without judgment, offering gentle advice and wisdom. "Life has storms too," she said. "They come unexpectedly. But if you remain aware and patient, you will find your way through them, just like the desert teaches. As the day turned to evening, they began walking again, moving carefully across the wet sand and rocky terrain. The traveler noticed a new sense of trust growing between them. He trusted her knowledge, her instincts, and her judgment. He also noticed he trusted himself more, feeling confidence in his ability to adapt, observe, and survive. The storm had been a trial, but it had also become a shared experience that deepened their bond. Finally, as night approached, they reached a high dune that offered a breathtaking view of the desert. The storm had cleared enough to reveal a sky filled with stars, brighter and more brilliant than ever. They sat together in silence, taking in the view. The traveler felt a mixture of relief, awe, and gratitude. The storm had been difficult, but it had also shown him the true strength of the woman beside him, the courage, wisdom, and calm presence that guided them through the worst. He realized that the desert had taught him more than survival skills. It had shown him the power of trust, patience, and resilience. He had seen fear, faced danger, and learned to move with intention. But more importantly, he had learned about human connection, the way shared challenges create bonds, the way quiet guidance can change a life, and the way respect and understanding can build trust that lasts far beyond the desert. That night, as they lay under the stars, the traveler felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced the desert's challenges and survived them, not alone, but with her guidance and support. He thought about the lessons she had taught him, the importance of observation, patience, humility, and trust. He realized that these lessons applied not just to the desert but to every aspect of life. The storm had tested them, but it had also united them in a way that nothing else could have. The traveler drifted to sleep, feeling the desert around him, feeling the quiet presence of the woman beside him, and understanding that this experience would remain with him forever. The challenges they had faced together had revealed the strength of the human spirit, the wisdom that comes from experience, and the importance of guidance, patience, and trust. And as he slept under the wide, endless sky, he knew that life, like the desert, was unpredictable, challenging, and full of lessons waiting to be discovered, if only one was willing to listen. The desert had calmed after the storm, returning to its serene, golden calm. The traveler and the young Apache woman walked together in quiet harmony, their steps light but purposeful. The days of learning, observing, and surviving had shaped the traveler in ways he could not yet fully understand. Each sunrise, each sunset, and each shared moment had left a mark on him, gently reshaping his mind, heart, and perspective on life. As they reached a small plateau overlooking a wide expanse of desert, the traveler paused to take in the view. The wind carried a fresh, earthy scent, and the sand glowed softly under the early evening sun. He thought back to the first day he had arrived here, how small and uncertain he had felt, how unprepared he had been to face the challenges of the desert. Yet in the company of the young woman, he had grown stronger, more aware, and more connected to both the land and himself. He realized that the lessons he had learned were not temporary. They were deeply rooted, like the resilient desert plants that survived against all odds. The woman turned to him with a gentle smile. "You have learned much," she said. "But remember, these lessons are not just for the desert. Take them with you wherever life leads. They are part of who you are now." He nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude that words could barely express. Her guidance had been more than teaching survival skills. It had been an awakening. He had learned to notice beauty, to respect life, and to trust in patience, perseverance, and understanding. He had learned that life's storms, like the desert, could be navigated safely with calmness, awareness, and cooperation. And most importantly, he had learned that meaningful connections could change a person profoundly, even in a short time. For several hours, they walked side by side, talking softly about life, their dreams, and their families. She shared more stories about her people, about the desert, and about the wisdom passed down through generations. The traveler shared tales of the city, of busy streets, crowded subways, and the constant rush that had filled his days. She listened attentively, never judging, and offered insights that made him see familiar experiences in a new light. He realized that her guidance extended far beyond the desert. It was guidance for living a full, conscious, and intentional life. As the sun began to dip behind the distant mesas, the traveler realized that their time together was coming to an end. A bittersweet feeling filled his chest. He had grown attached, not only to the lessons of the desert but also to her presence. She had become a symbol of wisdom, patience, and courage, and he knew that leaving the desert would also mean leaving a part of himself behind, the part that had learned to truly notice, to truly listen, and to truly understand. They stopped at a small rock formation, where the woman had spent much of her time observing and meditating. She turned to him and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "The desert will always be here," she said, "and so will the lessons you've learned. Remember them and you will carry the desert in your heart, no matter where you go." He felt a lump in his throat, words catching as he struggled to express his gratitude. "I don't think I can ever thank you enough," he said. "You've shown me a way to see life differently." "I'll never forget this journey or you," she smiled, her eyes calm and kind. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "You did the work. You listened, you observed, and you learned. The desert guided you, and so did your own heart." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the sky transform from bright gold to deep violet. The stars began to emerge, twinkling gently above them. The traveler felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He realized that this experience had changed him, not only in knowledge but in spirit. He understood the value of patience, the importance of observation, and the strength that came from facing challenges with courage and humility. He also realized the power of connection, the way meeting the right person at the right time could illuminate paths he had never imagined. When it was time to part, the woman handed him a small, smooth stone she had found near a spring earlier in their journey. "Keep this," she said, "a reminder of the desert, the lessons, and the journey you have shared. Whenever you see it, remember what you have learned and who you have become." The traveler took the stone with reverent hands. "I will," he promised, feeling the weight and significance of the gesture. The stone was simple, yet it carried the memory of every step, every story, and every lesson they had shared. It was more than a keepsake, it was a symbol of transformation. They embraced briefly, and then she turned to continue her path into the desert, her silhouette blending with the soft shadows of the dunes. He watched her disappear, feeling a mixture of sadness and gratitude. The encounter had been brief, yet its impact would last a lifetime. The desert had tested him, guided him, and taught him, but it was her presence, her wisdom, and her quiet strength that had transformed him completely. As he began his own journey back toward civilization, the traveler felt a renewed sense of purpose. The lessons of the desert and the guidance of the Apache woman were not something he could simply leave behind. They were now part of him, woven into his thoughts, decisions, and perspective on life. He realized that he could carry the peace, awareness, and wisdom he had gained into every aspect of his daily life, from relationships to work, from challenges to simple moments of joy. Days turned into weeks as he returned to the city, but he noticed the difference immediately. The noise, the rush, and the constant movement no longer overwhelmed him. He could find stillness amidst chaos, notice details that had once gone unseen, and approach challenges with patience and calm. His conversations with others became more thoughtful, his observations more meaningful, and his appreciation for life deeper than ever before. The stone the woman had given him rested on his desk, a small but constant reminder of his journey. Whenever he glanced at it, he remembered the desert, the storm, and the countless lessons learned under the vast sky. He remembered her calm presence, her stories, and her gentle guidance. And each time he remembered, he felt gratitude, not just for the experience but for the way it had changed him, shaped him, and inspired him to live more consciously and fully. Months later, he returned to the desert once again, not out of necessity but out of desire. He walked the dunes, watched the sunsets, and felt the wind brush against his face. Though the Apache woman was not there, her lessons remained with him. He walked with intention, observed with care, and listened with an open heart. The desert was no longer just a place to visit. It was a teacher, a guide, and a mirror reflecting the growth he had achieved. The traveler realized that life itself was like the desert. It could be beautiful, harsh, challenging, and transformative all at once. It demanded patience, courage, and attention, and sometimes it brought extraordinary people into one's life to guide, inspire, and transform. He had met one such person under the desert sky, and that encounter had changed him forever. He often shared his story with others, not to boast, but to inspire. He spoke about the beauty of the desert, the lessons learned, and the wisdom of the young Apache woman who had guided him. He spoke about patience, observation, resilience, and the quiet power of human connection. And in sharing his story, he realized that the impact of one meaningful encounter could ripple outward, touching not only his own life, but also the lives of those who listened and learned from his experience. As he lay under the stars one night, far from the city lights, he felt a deep sense of peace. The desert, the storm, the lessons, and her presence had all shaped him into someone more aware, more appreciative, and more alive. He understood that the journey would continue, that life would bring new challenges, new encounters, and new lessons. But he also knew that he carried something enduring within him, a memory, a lesson, and a spirit awakened under the desert sky, guided by a young Apache woman who had changed his life forever. The traveler smiled softly to himself, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had never known before. He had arrived in the desert seeking adventure, but he had found wisdom, connection, and transformation. He had learned that life's true value was not in rushing forward or seeking recognition, but in observing, listening, respecting, and embracing the world with openness and patience. And he knew, with quiet certainty, that these lessons would guide him for the rest of his life. The desert had given him more than he could have imagined. And she, the young woman who had appeared under the sky like a silent teacher, had left an imprint on his soul. Every time he saw the stone she had given him, every time he recalled the wind across the dunes or the glow of a desert sunset, he remembered the way she had guided him, not with force, but with wisdom, patience, and quiet strength. She had shown him the path, and he had walked it. And in walking it, he became a different person, someone more aware, more grateful, and more alive. Someone who understood that the most extraordinary lessons often come from the most unexpected encounters. Someone who knew that a single person, appearing at the right moment, could illuminate a life forever. Under the endless desert sky, the traveler had learned that transformation was possible, that guidance could change a life, and that the beauty of the world was revealed not just in grand adventures, but in the quiet, meaningful moments shared with another human being. And with that understanding, he carried the desert and her lessons within him, ready to face the world with courage, awareness, and a heart forever changed.